There's a thing called a selective perception test. One version of it has you watch a video of 6 people playing basketball for about a minute. 3 people are wearing white t-shirts, 3 are wearing black t-shirts. And you're asked to count the number of times the players in white t-shirts pass the ball to one another. And if you watch really carefully and focus, you'll get the right answer, which is 15. But then a question flashes on the screen saying, "But did you see the gorilla?" And the reaction is, "What gorilla?" And they replay the video and show that in the middle of the game, a person dressed in a gorilla suit walks through the middle of the basketball game, and we completely don't even notice it. We're so focused, we've trained our attention on the ball and on the players in white t-shirts that anything in black, like the gorilla, just seems to be filtered out of our perception. It's a really clever little test, and I'll put the link to that website below in the description here. But this idea of selective perception really links into what the gospel is about today, but not necessarily in an obvious way. Jesus heals a blind man. But you'll notice it's a very long passage, that whether you read it in John's Gospel or hear it proclaimed at Mass, it's a very long passage. And you think, well, why did it take so long to describe this? Because the short version would have been, Jesus healed a blind man, like he'd done before and would do again, the end. And in fact, the miracle section of this passage only takes a couple of lines. The rest of it is this dialogue, this sort of drama that unfolds the implications of Jesus having healed the blind man. As the Pharisees challenge the man for being healed, they become upset that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, as they did a number of times. That became a concern for them. The Pharisees then go off and talk to the man's parents. They come back to the man again. And there's this ongoing dialogue and drama around what it means that Jesus healed this man. Now here we start to get into a real irony, that the blind man can see who Jesus is. He's able to recognize that he's a good man from God. And yet the Pharisees, the ones who are the religiously educated people who should be able to see what God is doing in the world, are completely blind to it. They, like us watching the basketball video with the gorilla, have simply filtered out the things they don't want to see or are not looking for. And so they are left completely in the dark, and we see that theme throughout the entire Gospels. There are people who don't see who Jesus is and what Jesus is doing. So cut to our day, it's about our perception. It's about, do we see Jesus at work? Do we see God at work in our world? There are many people who have experienced a miracle or believe in the miracles that others have experienced and say, if only people could see this, then they would believe and understand. But yet, for a person who doesn't really want to believe, no miracle, no evidence, nothing will convince them, because selective perception means people simply filter out or rationalize away those things. This weekend, I'm celebrating a wedding of a lovely young couple, Daniel and Kristen, and I always kind of use that as an opportunity to address the crowd at the wedding, many of whom, of course, are not churchgoers, and say, we can look at Daniel and Kristen, and we can look at them and we can see love at work. We can see God's plan for 2 people to come together, for the love that God has planned in their hearts to join together, to overflow and to form a new family. We can see God, who is love, in them. Or we can see nothing at all. We can just simply see biology. We can just say, yep, it's a biological urge towards one another, and it's a need for social approval from others that means we have a big wedding. And that's the material rationalist view of the world, that says there's no such thing as love. And those people will simply filter out any of the fingerprints of God in their lives, in the lives of others, or in the world. But for us, in these last few weeks before Easter, we are invited to open our eyes, to have spiritual sight, to see God at work, so that we are ready to see when that Jesus rises from the dead. And this is not just a nice thing for him 2,000 years ago, but this is the transforming event of human history. This is God, through Jesus, conquering sin, conquering death, and bringing about a new and restored life, not just for Jesus, but for all of us. And for us, not just in eternity after we die, but here and now, we can begin to live the transformed life of Easter. That happens for us through baptism. And we'll be baptizing people at our Easter Vigil this year, because Easter is the perfect time to celebrate baptism, which is the immersion into the death and resurrection of Jesus. For us, most of us watching this video who probably are baptized already, it's a time for us to rekindle and refresh and recommit to our baptism so we might have again the joy of God's life surging and working through us if we have the eyes to see. So in these weeks, today, this week and these weeks ahead, let's pray to have our eyes open, to choose to see God at work, to look at the world through the lens of faith and belief and hope and love, not through the lenses of cynicism and doubt. It's okay to doubt, we'll talk about that after Easter, but we have to have a fundamental openness to believe and to want to see God at work. So I invite you, in your prayer, perhaps to use the words, Lord, show me, Lord, what you are doing. Open my eyes. And we sing hymns, and I'm sure we'll be singing them this weekend at Mass. Open my eyes, Lord. Let me see your face. Or open the eyes of my heart, Lord. I want to see you. Make those words, those songs, your prayer, to open your eyes, to broaden your perception, so you might be ready to see God at work in your life.